It's the Sod Pod, brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod. Hello, and welcome to the Sod Pod. This is episode 12. I'm joined here with Johnny O'Loughlin and Steady Eddie Healy. Lads, an unusual year, but things starting to kick off there at the minute. Ed, what's on your mind?
Jesus, well, as you know, James, there's not a whole lot in my mind, so it's not something we need to be concerned about. Yeah, look, it's after being a tough year, Jim, up to this point, and it continues, unfortunately. Do you know, it's been cold. It's been cold. Growth rates are poor, to say the least, now at this point, and a lot of farms in the country. Our growth is only barely meeting demand in terms of grass there. So it's challenging times, James.
And how are we going to solve that? Like, what advice would we give that farmer today? Because if it ain't growing and if the growth rates are so far down, that's going to cause further pressures. Obviously, we know there was feed problems at the beginning of this year and big feed bills as well.
Yeah, look, it's tough. I think there's never, I know I've been saying this for the last few weeks there, but like there's probably never been, or it's never been as important really to be walking the farm every 5 days and really, doing your farm walks, getting that information up on the pasture base and really evaluating what you have on the farm at the moment, and that's really a great indicator on where to go. So, like if you're to look at, I just had before we came onto the call here, I had a look at a couple of the Tier-Lon future farm farmers. Just to have a look at some of the data that's coming back from those, and we're looking at pre-grazing yields of anything from 1,100 up to 1,400 at the moment. And really anybody that's kind of in a situation where they're at a pre-grazing yield consistently of 1,200s would want to be looking at upping the rate of meal or trying to bring in extra ground into the grazing platform so that they can maintain that 21-day round. But I suppose start to get a little bit slightly higher covers into the diet of the animal. The other thing that we want to be looking at this point is just to make sure really that we have enough nitrogen going out on farms to actually grow the quantity of grass that we're looking to actually grow. As we all know, we've had a very late spring this year. We missed out on a couple of rounds of fertiliser early on, and it was very hard to get out with slurry on farms too. So we probably are a little bit behind where we would have been in previous years. And I suppose with the cold temperatures, it's leading to a situation now where we're struggling for grass around the country.
John, would you agree with Ed there on that?
Yeah, it's the facts, James. It's grass growth is definitely suppressed. We would prefer to be doing an awful lot better. You look at Twitter or anything there, Jim, and you see just people going buffer feeding silage, upping the meal, chatting to a lot of farmers. An awful lot of farmers are feeding maybe 5, 6, 7 kilos, as Ed said. Probably wouldn't want to be feeding as much in a normal year. So grass supply is definitely suppressed on farm, which is a big challenge. Now, if you trace that back, there's the weather piece, but also the lack of slurry and fertiliser applications, fair enough. The other side of it is that there's an awful lot of that spring grazing damage is probably having an influence there as well, James. That's probably rearing its head at the moment, which is unfortunate. It has been really tricky, I suppose. Milk supplies are back, depending on the co-op you speak to, between 5 and 10%, which is a huge loss to farmers as well on the milk side. Cattle aren't thriving as well as we would have hoped, and crops are surprising enough. And when we talked to Siobhan earlier on, it was all very much doom and gloom, James. But in reality, right, crops aren't looking too bad now. There was a couple of very unusual looking crops over the last couple of weeks, but that seems to come out of them. There was late sown spring barley. Some of it seemed to go after the stress of herbicide or a fungicide, a kind of a white colour. I've never seen anything like it, but that seems to have come out of it, maybe lack of nutrition or compaction or a bit of yellow dwarf, etc. So in general, it's a very tricky time on farm. As Ed says, we need to kind of identify what we need to do, what are our priorities. And for me, it's quite simple, right? You take the data from the sustainability program, James and Ed.
Yeah.
Like we're back 10% on silage yield, and we've never been in a situation where the cupboards have been as bare.
Yeah.
So coming up with a plan to boost grass supplies in the short term, and most importantly, fill those forage reserves for the winter/spring of 24 and 25 is really, really important.
Yeah, and we still have time to do that, John. Like all is not lost at this point.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at. Look, the predicted weather is for temperatures to improve slightly as we move into July. So hopefully we'll get that, and hopefully on the back of that we'll get a good bounce in growth, because look, there's still plenty of room for improvement, but there's still plenty of potential there to grow grass. So I suppose, look, we are back at 10% in terms of silage yield. So we really need, or we're really dependent on this second cut now to fill up stocks. Especially for anyone that's kind of buffer feeding at the moment, and look, we all know now in parts of the country there is still diet feeders on the go, unfortunately. So I suppose, look, we were down in Johnstown Castle a couple of weeks ago, and there was a really important message from the team down in Johnstown Castle, and I suppose, look, we had a chat about the amount of slurry that hasn't gone out yet at this point. And I suppose targeting all of those silage fields that haven't got it with a good amount, 2,500 gallons of slurry, but maybe looking at increasing the amount of nitrogen that we would have traditionally spread for second cut silage this year, to try and get in a slightly bigger second cut silage. So where we would have been looking at 60 units, we're probably looking at closer to the 80 units of chemical nitrogen, while also trying to get in an adequate amount of sulfur and getting in the P and K that we have, I suppose, removed from ground from the first cut. I don't know, would you agree with that, John? Or would there be anything else that you'd be looking at doing there?
No, it's fairly straightforward. Whether you have slurry or not, go. That's the decision. So you decide whether you're going to go with the slurry plus maybe a straight N plus S, so nitrogen plus sulfur, or then whether you're going, if you don't have slurry, if you have a P allowance, go with an NPKS, and if you don't have a P allowance and you don't have slurry, then you go with an NKS. So it's kind of that sort of decision tree when you're trying to come out. But I suppose the big thing is kind of upping the rate of nitrogen. There's a good response curve during the summer period, and there's little risk of losses to the water courses. Obviously, the water quality piece and the EPA report is something we're very, very mindful. And this is we're not, I suppose, bestowing, going, spreading higher rates of nitrogen without putting an awful lot of thought into it. But it's just so important that we apply the fertiliser so that we're able to grow our own feeds. That's so important. Grow as much forage as possible. Every kilo of nitrogen that you apply, you're going to get a return of around 45, 50 kilos of growth, so of dry matter. So it's a really powerful investment, and it really stacks up to buy the fertiliser and apply it, and just make sure that you have an allowance and push it on. But it's kind of in general sense, it's 80 units of nitrogen, so you can subtract your slurry if you have it and still try and get to your 80 units. And just bear in mind that during the summer period, even with low emission spreading, your nitrogen is reduced. So in springtime it's 9 units with a trail and chew or a dribble bar, and the summertime it's 5 units, but still you're 2,500 gallons to give you between 10 and 12 units. So that's very valuable nitrogen, and then you're just balancing up then to make up the deficit there.
Yeah, I think that's really that's a really good message to get out there, because look, there is plenty of slurry on farms. It is slightly less efficient at this time, but they're valuable nutrients to be getting in there. we know from research done that second cut silage crops react very, very well to P and K applied, and slurry is a really, really rich source of P and K. Look, I think the whole thing with your fertilizer, it's going to be slightly different on every single farm. Just make sure that every farmer out there that's listening keeps in contact with your advisor, whether that's your Teagasc advisor or your Grassland Agro rep, and I suppose you choose the right type of fertilizer for your farm and your situation. And I think that's going to be really important going forward.
Just there, you've both been heavy on sulphur in conversation there, and obviously sulphur is a very important role formation of chlorophyll. That's to get photosynthesis. That's just, I'm guessing, just to give that extra shove on. Sometimes that can be forgotten at this time of the year, you know. So if people haven't purchased, as you said, if you have the P allowance, NPK fertilizers, sulphur, 80 units of nitrogen, subject to what's in your slurry, like, simple message, John, very well broke down. But like, is there, if anyone was kind of on the fence there on sulphur, like, you'd be very heavy to go, lads, we need sulphur.
Yeah, non-negotiable nearly for second cut. Traditionally, sulphur is always a summer nutrient with the kind of rainfall events that we've got recently. We were kind of talking about going a little bit earlier, James, but in reality, it's really important. I suppose our own Claire Aspel is the queen of sulphur, and like her research shows a really significant response, increasing the efficacy of the nitrogen that you apply, and that means from farmer point of view, it's better for their pocket, but environmental point of view, there's more nitrogen getting up into the plant to grow you the grass, and that's what we want. We want to get it into the plant because I suppose on the EPA report, and that was something that we discussed in Johnstown as well, as water quality in general, like, and we all definitely have a part to play to try and make sure we hold on to the derogation. And with the most recent EPA report, you'd be kind of saying, jeepers, we're up against it. Mm-hmm. So it's these simple changes that we can make on farm will be really, really helpful. And listen, there's a good few people listening to the Sod Pod now, James, which is hard to believe from where we started from. But if everyone makes one small change, that accumulates into a real positive impact. And I know there's stuff outside of farmers' control, but in reality, if we all do our little bit, it'll all add up.
Yeah. So look, just on, I suppose, when you're talking sulphur there, John, really in a grazing scenario, we want to be targeting over the course of the year a 1:10 ratio of nitrogen to sulphur. That's really what we want to be targeting. But really, all of our silage fertilizer should have sulphur in it. And I suppose if we're talking about second cut specifically, we want to be trying to target maybe between 6 and 12 units. That'd be fair enough to say, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to get a good shake out. One of the problems with sulphur is it leaches very easily. So, after all the rainfall this spring, there's probably not a huge amount of it knocking around. And on lighter sides, you see a more pronounced response. But even on heavier sides during this period from now on, you get a massive hop off it. So, I'd say the message is universal for every farm. Make sure you get your sulphur into your silage fertilizer program. Really, really important. And I think, getting that bulk, the mix of quality is going to be very, very important, and making sure that we have a good enough supply there. We're going to need second cuts. Some farmers might need third cuts. It's we have a lot to get after, but I'd say slurry out, then follow up a week later with your fertilizer, get the whole thing kicked off and growing again. And give it to 6, 7, 8 weeks, depending on what your target is, and take it off again and rinse and repeat. If you have more slurry, ideal. If you don't, you're referring back to your nutrient management plan.
There's just one question. That's how was clover performing this year?
Poor. Very poor. Yeah.
So, look, I suppose the cold weather is probably not helping that, James. Really, what we need when we have clover is we want good soil temperatures, we want good air temperatures, and we also want light. In fairness to John O'Loughlin, there, John had always talked about light as a nutrient, and I suppose the cold days and the dull days are probably not helping our grass situation. But also, when we're talking about clover, we want those warm days to encourage, photosynthesis and encourage the bacteria that we actually have in the clover to fix that atmospheric nitrogen and bring it down into the sward and make it available for plant use. So really, look, to be totally honest with you, we need to be going out on a paddock to paddock basis, assessing the amount of clover that we have in the sward, and really, if we have anything below, our 20 or 25%, we really want to be careful with the amount of cuts that we're making to our chemical nitrogen, because we need that 20 to 25% clover in the sward to actually fix a significant amount of nitrogen and maintain those yields.
Yes.
Yeah, clover contents aren't there this year, Jim. Like, they just haven't got to where they need to be. And it goes back to all we discussed, is a little bit of the poaching we did, possibly lack of nutrition, as Ed said, the weather. But like, it has been disappointing. I'm not writing it off. I'm not saying but it's just that in the short term, until you get to the 25% content, I was chatting to the lads in Chagas about this. Like, they have the Clover 150 group, which are a brilliant group. Real early adopters, like some of them, not all of them, some of them have the 25% already, but a lot of them are struggling to get that 25% content, so you can make your nitrogen reductions. It is right, you're probably looking at a half rate or a three-quarter rate, even if you have, your 15% clover, but cutting out nitrogen completely is going to impact your growth, and you're going to just lose your quality. Like, grass quality as well as supply is an absolute nightmare on farms. So grass is very stressed. Like, it's a lot of farmers are seeing maybe some of the deficiencies, of stress, phosphorus deficiency, nitrogen, sulfur, potash, all this year where they mightn't have seen them before. We know that fertiliser usage is back, or fertiliser sales are back anyways. So the usage will follow because we have the register. And it's probably rearing its head, and grass growth is really being pinched, and like that's the only competitive advantage that we have, James. Is for the dairy, beef, lamb is growing grass and utilising it, and we're at a crossroads there, I suppose. What's probably maybe. It's understandable given the price, fair enough. But what is a little bit unusual is that we're back, a significant quantity of nitrogen. And a lot of farmers are asking the question, how come our water quality hasn't improved in line with the 300,000 tonnes of nitrogen that we produce? Mm-hmm. And a lot of that now, to be fair, could be legacy issues with nitrate coming down through the soil profile, 100% understand. A very wet spring where farmers maybe had to get out slurry and stuff like that. Very, very challenging. We empathise with all those farmers. But it is a bit of a frustration. And, in the midst of this, I suppose the derogation is being talked over and back as well. And it seems that it's very much going to have to be a political thing maybe to hold on to the derogation. And I am not a student of politics. I don't know a huge amount about it. But like it's going to need strong representation at an EU level, I'd say, to try and hold on to it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's an awful pressure and another frustration and worry for us all as we go through this tough times. When we look there at everything that's going on in Grassland Agro, obviously we're out of our huge yield assessment campaign. The next steps in the soil sustainability program, we jump into grass vests and solvitas. Why?
Yeah, so. It's a wicked busy time for us in Grassland Agro here at the minute. So we've kicked off our grass base and our Solvita program, and our advisors out on the road now they're up to their eyeballs digging in fields, looking at soil structure and rooting of crops. And I suppose, why is that really important? I suppose if you think about it, James, we're all trying to grow crops in this country, whether your crop is grass or whether your crop is maize or barley. What goes on over the ground is completely related to what goes on under the ground. So it's really important that we can actually go into fields, assess soil structure, so we can identify if there's any issues in terms of compaction or any other structural quality issues that are actually going on in there. And from that, then we can actually advise the farmer on what he can actually do better in order to, I suppose, increase the drainage of his ground, allow the soil to warm up a little bit faster in the springtime, get more oxygen in there, which is going to make life easier for the roots, and it's going to have an influence on actually growing your crops. And the other thing that we're actually trying to do actively is trying to assess the rooting of the crops that are actually in a specific field. Because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to promote plants to grow really dense, hairy, fibrous roots. And if we can do that, we're going to uptake more of the nutrients that are naturally in the soil. And really, the plant is going to have a much better chance then of getting access to the applied nutrients as well, James. So, look, I suppose that is a huge amount to do with what our advisors are at the moment. And look, it's really interesting. There's a huge variation across the country, and it's very farm specific depending on the soil type that farmers actually have out there. But yeah, look, some very valuable data we're getting back from it.
It's really important to go out there, especially after the spring. I don't think there's ever a more important year to do to try and see what the challenges are and come up with a plan. James, try and get stuck into them and sort them out. So very valuable for the farmer and very valuable for ourselves to try and develop that nutrient management plan.
I suppose, John, you mentioned there about the derogation and how important it is, and I suppose leading into that, the conversation that we've been having on water quality, in terms of soil structure and rooting there. Like if we have better soil structure, it's going to probably mean that we're going to be able to retain more nutrients in the soil. The plants are going to be able to get access to, but that also has a role to play really in preventing some of these nitrates from getting into waterways if we can actually utilise more of what's going into the soil. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's exactly it. The soil structure has a very strong correlation with water quality, and actually improving it means that you have more roots then and you have more potential to capture those nutrients rather than them getting into somewhere we don't want, like a water body. So listen, I think the water quality thing is very important. The practical steps that a farmer can take, I suppose, is the calibration of your fertiliser spreader. Massive one, the 4 principles: right product, right rate, right time. All those things are really, really important. They're the simple things we can do on farm. In the short term, the soil structure one might be a little bit of a longer piece, but these are all the things we're going to need to look into to improve water quality, improve our farm structures, make them more resilient, our farm systems even, and that's key to what we need to be doing going forward, and soil health will have a major role in that as well.
What's in the news? So what's in the news this week, lads? Well, first thing that's in the news, a big happy birthday to John O'Loughlin. It's a special day for John on Sunday.
Would you believe it? He's been treated to a nice long weekend away as well for his birthday, Jim. Would you believe that?
Isn't that only brilliant?
Yeah.
Off to an old spare retreat, John.
Yeah.
He loves it. He loves an owl face mask, I've been told now. From he likes to keep that quiet, but face masks are something that John really enjoys.
Well, you have me down to the tea, lads.
And a Carberry on the side.
Yeah.
So Ed, you've chosen an article this week. Big news, big announcements, a lot of worries, and it's probably a bit cryptic too, but we'll watch this space.
Yeah, look, I suppose we don't know a huge amount about it yet, Jim, is probably the first thing I'd like to say. So what I was looking at this week is the announcement that the nature restoration law has been signed into being. What that means we don't have a huge idea yet, but I suppose the information that we do have at the moment there is that about 20% of the EU's area, so that's covering land and seas, will be targeted to be restored in terms of different habitats and looking at different species of animals and plants, really. So look, as to what that means for Ireland and farming in Ireland, we don't 100% know that. I suppose the point we're at the moment there is each country has a 2-year period to actually develop a strategic plan as to how they're going to meet that 20%, and they then will have to outline that to the Commission in terms of reaching their targets. So there's going to be a bit of confusion about it. No one really knows what it means. There's a huge amount of talk about habitats and native species, and I suppose there's a huge piece or target in terms of agriculture about stocks of organic carbon that are in mineral soils. So look, I would assume that some of the changes are going to be targeted at building organic carbon reserves in the soil and not depleting what we have there at the moment. So whether that means we're looking at bans of ploughs and looking at minimum tillage and getting as much carbon or keeping as much carbon that's in the soil there, I'm not 100% sure yet. But yeah, look, it'll be.
Look, Ed, we'll need some very strong political leaders here that they don't just turn this into let the farmers' land be used for this. There's plenty of other land in the island as well, where all of these measures can be taken, whether it be our riverbeds or bogs or mountainous areas that are maybe could do with a bit more love and care as well. As you can't just land on the back of the farmer either. They'll have the role to play.
It's unlikely, but it could be a good thing, Jim, as well, because the likes of the Burn Life programme is what Acres is modelled on. Now, I know, listen, people would argue that it wasn't possibly, the implementation, the idea was right, maybe the execution, people would argue with Acres, and obviously for some farmers with the payment timelines and stuff like that. We won't get into that, but the general principle of the Burn Life programme was that you reward farmers based on performance for making positive environmental impacts. And what they found is that one of the measures in that is actually the intensity of your grazing, and the higher your grazing intensity, the higher the reward. So basically, if you clear off that vegetation, it allows all the flora and fauna to come back into life again the following year, and you get more species and more biodiversity. And I suppose the big thing about biodiversity, just that I've learned about it over the last couple of years, is not that you have an area behind the shed that's left in nettles and docks and briars. It's that it's actual diversity. Those weed plants have very little actual biodiversity value because I think every farm in the country has a little bit of them. So I think, listen, it's going to have to take a lot of thinking. A lot of the farm organisations are out there kind of, saying that we need to have more facts and figures and data and a baseline, which is all fairly fair commentary. And I think as things become more clear, it'll be very interesting to watch it unfold. Obviously, there's a change there as well, James, in the leadership in the Green Party.
That's right, yeah. Eamon Ryan's time is done. We wish him the best of luck. I will have an awkward silence now.
Yeah, we will. You will. Like, to be fair, you had a quote in there, James, about the cars there recently. And I think Ivan Yates is getting worried there that he might be taking over there, and the political commentary as well. But to be fair, like the environmental piece is so important. Obviously, there's been a lot of clashes and flashpoints with the way that he's put across some of the stuff, or maybe the Green Party in general. But the reality is that we all need to get on board, and we need to be working with each other and telling the story of how good we are in Irish agriculture at what we do, and rather than going against each other. I would say that Green Party should be champions of Irish agriculture, especially at an EU level. That's the way that they should be looking at it, in my opinion, and they should be really showing how unique and how good we are. Because I still think from the research that I've done that we are ahead of New Zealand, who are the only ones that could really hold a candle to us as well, Jim.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And sure, look, at this point, all we can do is wait and see what's going to happen and what's going to unfold. But interesting times ahead.
Interesting times. Up Ireland, up farming.
Up
Mind
Ireland.
yourselves out there.
Then-
Farm smart, farm safe. Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.